It's the Cam Meekins show. We're on a big rabbit hole right now about audio. And I got my guy Mega Yacht in the building with me. In a different building, but still here in spirit. It's episode 18, I think it is. So we've been doing it for a little bit now.
It's my lucky number.
There you go. But man, what's been going on with you, dude? How you living? You caught some waves today? Tell me about the surf journey you've been on.
Oh yeah, man, that's pretty much the best way of describing it. I pretty much get out there and get totally wrecked by wave after wave after wave, and until I feel like I can't paddle back to shore, and that's when I call it a day.
So have you been surfing for your whole life, or is this kind of a new thing? Or
I think I've been surfing like 7 times in total, and that would all be in the past month maybe.
Oh wow.
But it's really sweet, man. It's like totally like a new sort of relationship that I've come to have with the ocean. You know, I grew up going to the beach, the Jersey Shore in the summertime, swimming in the ocean like one does when you go to the beach, and going out on the boat, going fishing and stuff like that. But the waves are like this sort of like in between space where you can feel like the power of the ocean like in such a direct way. And it's pretty scary, honestly, at times. Like the waves come in, like you see surfers from afar, you're like, oh, that shit looks so easy. Like every time before I get into the water, I'm like, oh, the waves are looking so reasonable today. And I get in there and I just get fucked up really bad. But those few seconds that you do manage to catch like a little piece of one, and the wave like picks you up and just takes you in, it's the sweetest feeling ever.
so is that what it is? The wave just has all this pressure behind it, so you can just get wrapped up in it, and it's not just a surface level thing. It's actually kind of, there's a lot of shit going on underwater too with it, or?
Yeah. Like when you're paddling out and trying to get like out, they're called sets. Like waves come in sets of like, 3 to 5 waves, all like coming in at once. When the sets come in and you're paddling out, like you can't really get under them, or at least I can't. On a longboard, you can't really get under them that much. So you got to just try to like sort of like get a little space between the board and you, and then go through the white water. But yeah, if you get really like flipped over and tossed off the board, you're going to get held under like for a while, dude.
So that's when you're not trying to actually surf the wave, when you're just kind of paddling out and a wave's coming at you, you have to do that? Or that's what you do before you get up and try and get on the wave?
That's what you have to do when you're paddling out. Like when you're paddling, for me, it's 80% paddling. That's the difficult part. Like
that's the hard part.
Yeah, when you're paddling out and the wave's coming up and you're not even ready to start trying to catch one, and it just totally tosses you off, that's when it's the worst for me.
Yeah, well, that must be frustrating too, because you're just like, I'm not even trying to get up right now. I'm just trying to get to where I need to get to, and it's like you're just, getting knocked back.
I go with my neighbor who's a pretty experienced surfer, and like he just flies right out there.
Yeah,
and he's catching waves while I'm still trying to paddle out for the first time. And I finally make it out there. He's like, what's up, man? How's it going? I'm like, dude, I'm ready to call it a day, man. Like,
yeah, it's just been a journey just to get there. Yeah.
And it's just a set of muscles that I'm never using. And so I just get so exhausted immediately. But
is it like your lats because you're paddling like that? Like what are you getting sore from? Your legs?
It's all of this. It's shoulders? Not the legs at all, because like it's legs when you start standing up, but yeah, it's just like your upper body, arms, tries, and stuff like that. I really have to increase my, arm workouts.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's one of those things too. The more you do it, you get those, that muscle memory, and start to kind of. So has it been kind of like a spiritual journey for you a little bit too, getting out there, or like what's you've been doing it pretty consistently now? What's driving you to keep going?
I would say in a way, like it's just really nice to be out on the water, man. It just brings me so much happiness to be floating in the ocean,
Yeah.
So stress relieving, and a lot of the times we have to get up just before any light. I got up at 4:30 this morning, and I'm not such a great morning person, but it sort of like forces you to become like, now I just naturally like, I'm up at 7:30 and I'm like, word, I guess I'm up, you know? And, but yeah, just the cold water, it's like 50, 55 degrees. And I don't know, it just does something to my body that just has me feeling so nice every time I get out. And, I don't know, there's a lot of like random, like, like catching waves is sort of like a metaphor for life in a way, you know, like
Yeah.
you get out there, you try to do your thing and you just continually get fucked up and you learn everything the hard way until eventually like you start catching like some small waves and then you can, you know, there's definitely a lot of progression and like small victories along the way, which is good. You know, if I catch one good wave in a day, like the whole session is a win, you know?
Yeah, it's funny you said like happiness. I feel like it's one of those things where it's creating some discipline in this way where it's like you have to get up, you're putting this physical energy towards this thing. It's a challenge, you're constantly getting hit, you know, and then you have to get back up and then you get the end thing, which is like catching the wave. And I've never surfed a day in my life, so I'm just talking shit, but I get it, you know, from a kind of analogy standpoint. I understand why it would kind of keep reeling you back in. And, you know, you to me, you seem like this guy who's, you know, got a good head on your shoulders in that sense, in terms of doing things intentionally that can lead to just feeling happy overall. And so I'm curious, you know, your thoughts about that. Kind of, do you think that it's the discipline of doing that that's kind of that leads to like the happiness, and not just with surfing, but overall, like, you know, what do you do in your life to kind of try and bring more positivity and happiness to yourself in your life?
Yeah, I would say that surfing definitely sort of occupies a sort of, I guess, desire of having some balance in my life, you know, and especially, you know, the past year plus in lockdown when daily life is so different. And given the nature of, you know, being a t-shirt designer, I can just easily like lock myself in my office all day long and essentially just keep doing what I'm doing. But I found that that's not really, and I think that works for a lot of people, but for me, it doesn't really benefit me creatively to spend so much time like dialed in, you know? So surfing is just sort of like a way to get out there and like have like, just honestly, part of it is just being able to experience all this beautiful like coastline, like sweet natural beauty, and getting outside. And yeah, just totally like removing yourself from everything. Like you can't bring a phone out there, obviously, you know, and it's such a physically demanding thing that you literally like, if you don't like put everything, like all of your thought into doing that, you're going to get completely smashed by a wave and have a rough time.
Yeah, it's like that flow, right? Like you have to kind of, you're getting in that, you're forced to really be there in the moment and nowhere else, because if you don't, you're going to get hit by someone else, or you're going to get hit by a wave or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, like my creative process has always been sort of like, I have an idea and then I'm making it right away. And then that's it. You know, I'm posting on Instagram 20 minutes later, you know, I'm not necessarily like working on one specific design for like a really long time.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like on the technical side. And before, I always thought that like traveling and like just seeing things that are new would, you know, sort of be the creative fuel. And I've just sort of had to reevaluate where that is coming from these days, just given the nature of the situation,
Right.
COVID wise.
Yeah. Well, it's true though, you know, you can still get that 30 minutes away from where you live, you know, and we live in LA, and obviously, you know, it's amazing to be able to get to the coast living, you know, in California. But no matter where you are, right? If you can kind of figure out a way to just kind of get that without having to get on a plane and go to, you know, some destination or whatever, like it can kind of be done if you're intentional about it, it sounds like. But That's interesting. I feel the same with my creative process with music and shit that I do. Like, I've never been super, excited about making something and then spending all this time thinking about like, how do I roll it out properly? And how do I do, kind of, think about it like a real, big business thing. Like, I just like making my music and putting it out there on my terms when I'm ready. And the time that I'm most excited about it is when I just made something. And so I like to put stuff out when it's not fully, kind of, it hasn't been sitting for a month or 2 months or whatever, and I haven't kept coming back to it and tweaking it and doing different things. I like the first rendition of something because that's like the original idea, So what's your creative process like? I mean, I know you touched on it a little bit, but do you kind of just get in your studio and just create and just kind of let it go where it goes? Or do you have to be more intentional about it now that it's become more of a business for you as you've gotten more and more, popular with your clothing brand and everything that you're doing? What's that like for you?
I would say that, my creative process started when I was in college studying art history and sort of learning about other people's creative process and how, different art movements different artists would like play off of each other and stuff like that. And I would that would be my starting point. And, I wouldn't say that I have like a real creative process that's
different every time.
I'm just sort of like, I'll make maybe 20 designs and then scrap all 20 of them, you know what I mean? And then one day I'll get a little frustrated and a little pissed, and then I'll come back and then I'll make like 4 designs that I'm like, yeah, these are all amazing. What are we talking about? And so I'm just sort of, it's almost like all of a sudden it feels like, there's the stakes are higher for the designs that I make. Like, I feel more of a pressure now that like every design's got to be hot,
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. But it feels like you're, from my side, knowing you, I see you as an artist. I don't think of you as a fashion designer, right? Like, and that seems to be what your approach is to your products and, the stuff that you put out there too. It's, you do it in this artistic way where you just kind of let things get created when you're inspired. And that authenticity, I think, is, one of the things that I love so much about what you do, And so were you always an art person? I know you studied art history, and I'd love to hear about kind of that journey for you. But were you always kind of creating stuff as a kid, or is that something you got into after college?
Not at all, man. Like, my first, relationship with art, I mean, at first, art to everyone is like art class at school, and I was never good at drawing, like it was like almost like, I think that the way that art is taught is pretty backwards, like if you're not good at drawing like a still life fruit in the bowl, like you're not good at art, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So my whole life I grew up thinking like, oh, like I'm no good at this, like art sucks, art's bullshit, like all this stuff, And I remember like in middle school I wrote an essay about how I thought painting murals was like such a waste of money, and how, that money should be going to like provide hot food like for people that need it, stuff like that. And it didn't, really even occur to me later in life the importance of murals and what that can do on a more like day-to-day, like just living in a beautiful place and things like that. Until I was like in this digital marketing class, or it was called media studies class, and we had to like make advertisements or something like that.
Was this in high school or college?
This was in high school, and we were, like given some sort of assignment, and I was like, I just like downloaded Photoshop and I like made it in this thing, and I was like, I suck at art, dude. Like this is like, I did some shit in like 2 seconds, and I turned it in, and my teacher was like, Jacob, like, can I talk to you for a second? I'm like, oh shit, here we go.
You have the eye.
And she's like, do you see what everybody else just turned in? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, their shit is trash. Like your shit is hitting. I'm like, for real? What?
What was the piece?
What?
What was it?
It was like, I honestly can't remember, dude. I think it was like an advertisement for a Prius that I made.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was some stupid shit, man. But I just like Photoshopped like some stuff together, and I thought it was like really bad basically, but I don't know. She was like the first person that ever like gave me any sort of assurance that like I could do that, you know, like creatively. You know, I never thought of myself as a creative person whatsoever. And that's sort of, I guess, is what started my like general interest in like, oh, like art isn't just drawing pen on paper. You know what I'm saying? It's not just like a paintbrush doing this. Like art can be so much more than what you're taught art is growing up, you know? And then that sort of got me into this spiral. And then she told me like, oh, like, look at like Jean-Michel Basquiat. And like, at the time I thought I was like the only person who knew about him. And like, I was like, holy shit, this is really dope. And like, you know, that sort of sent me off on this whole thing. And then, yeah, that's what started it for me.
It's so funny, the importance of those, you know, 1 or 2 moments in your upbringing. I was just talking to my friend Nicole Dubois, who's doing a ton of really cool stuff on social media, and she's doing comedy stuff on TikTok and Instagram. And it's funny because we went to high school together, but then we reconnected on the podcast because she's doing her own thing, and I wanted to bring her on and talk about that whole process. And we were talking about how we both were in a lot of performing arts classes together when we were in high school. And for me, I was a horrible student in high school, but those relationships that I had with a couple of those teachers, you know, really allowed me to get into what I ended up doing for a career in music, because there was a music technology class at my high school. And, you know, the randomness and the privilege of that is, you know, I mean, you know, it can't be kind of downplayed. Like if I didn't have that exposure to that class, and just, you know, the great person behind that class and the other couple teachers that kind of motivated me verbally to, you know, not be down on myself, even though I was getting bad grades in all these other areas of study. But when I was doing music and all the other performing arts, I was really, you know, excelling. They gave me that confidence, and they gave me the tools in the form of those classes to actually learn how to do the shit that I do. And it's just so crazy how, you know, one thing like that can lead you down a whole path, and, you know, a career path, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too. Like a lot of people that, you know, live in the creative world, like living in LA, like, you know, didn't go to college, and they're like actively like anti going to school and getting education and stuff, which, you know, I totally can relate to on many levels. When I was in school, I was like, this is whack, you know,
right.
Like I'm definitely not loving this. Like, I don't think that I'm going to, you know, I was not doing the reading, you know what I mean, sort of thing, as well as I should have been. But when I look back on it, it's like there were definitely like, you could distill like 5 moments in like my learning career that like something snapped. I read like a paragraph in a fucking paper, or we talked about something in class that like dramatically like changed the way that I looked at everything, you know? And I think like those like few moments, like you can't put a price on that. And those are really invaluable experiences. And if you can have the privilege to go to school, which is an immense and amazing privilege to have in the first place, that, you know, I don't think I could be doing what I'm doing without it on some levels.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I fucking hated school when I was growing up, but as I've gotten older, I understand now that, you know, at least for me, and, you know, if I have kids one day, like, you know, school is in a lot of ways just there to kind of give you this structure so that like something can come up and make like a life-changing impact on you, you know? And so like, I mean, that's kind of, it sounds like what you're talking about. I mean, on the one hand, I think, you know, if you are going the more traditional path, school can be really valuable. I think you're right. A lot of people who are on our paths, creatives and artists and musicians and people who are trying to do entertainment or whatever, have this, you know, particular kind of view on school. And I was one of those people, and kind of am one of those people in some ways. You know, I think that there's a lot that we could do differently in our education system to help propel people and maybe make people feel like they can try and be more entrepreneurial or whatever, or at least like teach people how to pay taxes in high school. That's a big one. But
shit, man, I need that course.
You know, but so yeah. Anyways, the whole, as I've gotten older, I guess I just kind of realized that, you know, there's just really good opportunities there beyond the curriculum in the form of like personal development and relationships you get with teachers and random opportunities like that can happen that make a huge impact in your life later on that you don't realize are going to make a huge difference. And so, you know, it just kind of points to how important that structure is in our country. And when you look at kind of where we're at as a country, I think we need to collectively have more conversations about it and put more thought and resources behind building up that system for, you know, the whole country, because we're behind from an educational standpoint, you know?
I mean, yeah, from that standpoint, school's fucked, dude, you know?
Right. You know, we're kind of living in this post success era as a country where like we had our run post World War II where we were like the dominant, most amazing country, world power, huge military presence, and we still have all of that. We're the reserve currency. Everything is based on what the dollar is worth in every other part of the world. And at this point, we're basically just kind of riding off of that. It's like, you know, we are kind of like riding off the success of like our first album, like 15 years into our career. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where we're at as a country right now, because the US dollar is still like the most important thing from a currency standpoint at this point. But when you look at like our productivity and you look at our education and our healthcare system and all these other ways to like measure a society and whether or not it's doing good, like we're behind, you know?
Yeah, you can't take that first album for granted, man, and just coast.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good way of putting it.
But I think,
know if that first album was as good as we'd like to say either. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, for sure. There were a lot of problems there, you know? The engineer fucked up some shit, right?
A lot of shit.
But yeah, you know, I think like we could be doing a lot better in terms of like how we're motivating young kids to just like have the confidence to like follow what they want to do. And when you see a success story like yours, it's really inspiring. And that's why I wanted to bring you on and talk about it. Cause I think, you know, for any young person who's listening to this, like it's just so key to hear these stories, because I was in a position where, you know, I hated my situation in school, but I also had some, you know, one or two kind of things that happened that like allowed me to become what I became. And so, you know, for anyone who's kind of going through that, just understand that, you know, opportunities are everywhere, and, you know, try and think about, you know, where you want to go in your life. And, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And just leaning into the, whatever you don't like, you're learning just as much as what you do like, you know? I thought I was going to work in a gallery. In college, I was studying art history, and I thought, oh man, the art world is sweet. Like this is definitely what I want to be doing. You know, I don't want to be an artist, but I want to be like working in that world. It seems super cool, blah, blah, blah. I worked at a gallery one summer in LA. And like the entire thing just like immediately unraveled before my eyes. I was like, wow, this is horrible, you know, like.
So what's wrong with the art world in that sense?
Well, you know, I think people like to put art on this sort of elevated pedestal of like culture. And, you know, I think that art from a holistic standpoint is very different than art from an art market and art world standpoint, you know, from the holistic standpoint, like everything is art, you know, anything can be art or whatever. And it's not like meant to be bought and sold. But as soon as you start trying to buy and sell art and it starts selling for so many millions of dollars, then all of a sudden, like you just have another status symbol on your hands, you know? And that's what happened like in the 90s and into the 2000s when the art market started exploding. Our artworks that were selling for like $1 million are all of a sudden $500 million, you know? The billionaires all had their yachts, they had their houses, they had their planes, and now they're like, what do we need? Like, we need like a, you know, it's like an NFT, dude, like a finite thing. Like there are only so many Picassos in the world and I have one of them.
The sole purpose is just to show that you can afford it and, you know, someone else can't.
Yeah, to an extent, it's just a luxury commodity, you know? Right. And then so that means that like the entire way that the gallery system is run is just like people buy and sell art based on what they think will sell. And then that gets really messy when, you know, they think, oh, you know, there was a moment working at the gallery where this, you know, dude came in a Rolls Royce with like, you know, a woman half his age, like, you know, oh, like I have a friend who's looking to collect with like only like $1 billion. And I told him, I laughed at his face. And then like just talking about like, oh, I told him to like buy like artists of color and women and in 5 years to look like a visionary, you know, and like understanding like the reason that some people want to support like artists of color and women artists is just like from a like a status symbol perspective is really tough to wrap your head around, I think, and sort of, you know, conflicted on how to think about that, because of course like these artists of color and women artists have been disenfranchised for so long and deserve to be held in the limelight and spotlight that they've been, you know, actively held out of for so long. But when you learn about the reasons why they're being put in that spotlight for some people at such a high level, it's sort of like disgusting to think about these people doing it for their own selfish, oh, I'll look good to the collector community at large.
Yeah, you know? Well, it's just completely inauthentic and like racist, right? Like they're just saying like, oh, because, you know, other people are saying that, you know, that people of color and women have been disenfranchised in the art community and every other, you know, community and business and industry and everything like that. I see a buying opportunity in buying stuff in that category, but I don't actually support that category. I'm strictly doing it for, you know, to kind of almost joke about it and, you know, make money off of it is extremely fucked up. But it's par for the course for some douchebag that's pulling up in a Rolls Royce with, you know, some whatever situation. Like that's pretty wild.
And it just totally like, you know, the whole situation sort of totally broke down, like for me, the barrier between like flashy designer handbags and works of art, you know, it's just like the difference is a lot of it is just the price tag is different, you know, and like they're almost the same way.
Well, and it's just to show like, you know, I bought this, you know, you got this big Gucci design or, you know, big Louis Vuitton bag or something, you know, like the way that these things have been designed now are like so excessive, right? You know, when you talk about like designer clothes and stuff, it's kind of the same thing. And with art, you know, it can get kind of muddied when you have bad actors in that world. I mean, look at like Jeffrey Epstein was like big in the art world, like buying up like tons of art and, you know, supporting artists just to have a way of kind of, you know, finding, new people that he could be a predator towards. You know what I'm saying? And I just feel like there's a lot of that in the high end art world, because it's just a reality that, you know, if you're dealing with a world that you have to have billions of dollars to be a player in, you're dealing with, for the most part, old, rich, white men who are, you know, oftentimes racist and sexist and shitty people all around. And so, you know, that art world can get kind of, you know, just muddied by that dynamic. And it gets away from what it's actually about, which is art should, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not an artist. Like, what do you think art should be about? It shouldn't be this monetary store of wealth, right? It should be kind of a community thing that makes us all feel better, right? Like the best civilizations had great art everywhere, and it felt, you know, beautiful, to your point.
I mean, that's exactly like what I didn't really say earlier, but like about murals, you know, like that is like can be a beautiful and amazing form of like community centered art, you know, it's not like meant to be like hung in the house as a status symbol. It's like a public work essentially, you know, that can like make a area like cool or whatever, you know?
Right.
The mention of billionaires and stuff got me just thinking about something that has been somewhat on my mind lately, and I guess can tie back into like my, you know, newfound interest in surfing or whatever. But
yeah,
just, you know, and also why America is so fucked is just like how making as much money as possible is like celebrated to such a high degree that, you know, I just think that that shouldn't be the emphasis on like a measure of one's success, you know? Like, I don't want to be remembered as like Mega Yacht, the guy who made a lot of money selling t-shirts. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. So how do you balance
sort of
that?
like the destruction of art in a way, you know? It's like the monetization, like the capitalization of it, you know? And so, you know, rather than just pumping shit out, like taking a little bit more time with it and having just like a balanced life with it, you know, like being able to do shit on one's own terms without having to feel this like pressure of, oh, I'm not successful if I'm not making a lot of money doing whatever I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's such a false narrative that we all like have convinced ourselves of, and I'm definitely a victim of. Like, I would say, you know, I disproportionately tie like the success of a drop to like the money, you know, and that's something that I really don't want to have, but it's like a sickness that I have, and I think a lot of people have, you know, especially like in America, and even more especially like in LA, where that's like, you know, LA is capitalism at its finest, you know what
Well,
I'm
it's
saying?
all about status, right? Like, you know, you got this car and you got to look like this. And, you know, LA is just like a cesspool of that to like the 10th degree. Yeah. It's funny because I feel like, you know, the less you associate the results of, you know, the financial side of it to whether or not you think, you know, something is a success, ironically, kind of, you know, oftentimes the more successful things can become too, you know? And so I think it's a good lesson for any of us, and something that I'm taking home hearing you talk about this with everything that I'm doing. It's like, you know, why do you get into what you're doing? Like, I didn't get into music because I thought it was a great path to like generate money. Like, I understood that, like, yeah, like, you know, you have to like run a business and, you know, cover your basics and everything like that. But I got into music when I got into music because I like making music and I like being in the studio. And the less you're attached to the results financially, the more focus and attention you can have towards the work. And the better that work's going to be, which is ironically going to come around and actually make you more successful from a financial measurement standpoint, which you're saying shouldn't matter anyways. But it's just funny and something that we all should remember too. It's like, and I just, you know, I feel like you know, are a good example of that. It's, and like, you know, to me, like, I see you kind of as this like MF Doom type of figure in the fashion world, right? And like, I don't know how much you're hip to like MF Doom, but his whole thing was like, he had a record deal when he was like 17 with his, you know, a couple of his friends, and they were in a rap group and they got kind of burned by the industry. And so, you know, his whole kind of thing was that and that was the whole Dr. Doom analogies. Dr. Doom got burned in his face by doing this like science experiment when he was working for the good of the world, and all that got him was a ruined face. So he put the mask on and became a villain and wanted to take over the world and be a supervillain because he was mad at the world for burning his face. And MF Doom's whole thing was like the record industry burned him, so he put the mask on and became MF Doom, and, you know, was on this quest to kind of be the supervillain of the music industry and kind of be anti everything that the capitalist music industry was about. And, you know, he had all these different albums under different names, which is the last thing you want to do if you're trying to like reach the most amount of people. But he would actively hide projects and trying to like not let people know that they existed and shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you know, it's my process and, you know, journey of making clothes has changed over time and what it means to me. You know, I started making shirts with designer names on them because I wanted to be able to afford Gucci stuff. I wanted to be able to afford Chanel stuff. I just couldn't, you know. I was like, I can just put this on a t-shirt and just make it myself, you know. And then I sold enough of that. I started being able to afford it myself. And I look back on those times that I bought like a fucking $800 pair of shoes from Gucci or whatever. And I'm just like, God damn it, dude. That was so stupid, you know? Like, I get so much more satisfaction out of wearing my thing that I made that says Gucci on it than like the real thing that says Gucci. And so like, it's almost like become like something where I like, you know, if you write like Bart Simpson, like writing like, I will not do this, I will not do this, you know, like writing that on the wall so many times, like making so many like Louis Vuitton t-shirts, Chanel t-shirts, is sort of like almost like I was teaching myself that like they're only just stupid names that like anybody can write, anybody can use. They're not like, they don't really have real weight, you know, other than words, especially like what you're saying, like with these brands, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, et cetera, that have sort of over time become memes of themselves, in the sense that, you know, maybe back when these companies were founded, they were really grounded in like this artisan, like attention to detail, like finely made Italian garments or whatever you want to call it. Now it's just, they just have a t-shirt that's like made in the same factory as mine that just says Gucci and the biggest logo possible. Right. And so it's just like the quality of those t-shirts are not measurably better than mine or pretty much anybody else's for that standpoint, you know? And so it's just, yeah, it's sort of just been a process of realizing that like owning these things like doesn't make you like cool. It doesn't make you feel better about anything at all. If anything, it has the opposite effect. And so now I just wear like a plain t-shirt and pants and Skechers, you know, and Crocs. And I feel so much better. And I honestly just feel thankful that I think I had to get that out of my system. Like, because, you know, you spend so much time holding these brand names on a pedestal, like when you're younger, and like, there's no way that you can afford that stuff, you know? And so like, you just see people around you having these like high status item things, and you're like, oh yeah, that like means you're cool, that means you're successful, you know. And then for me, like, I quickly realized once I started being able to, you know, do that, that it was just a lie, basically.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was like a definitely like a notable shift in my attitude and opinion towards making the sort of graphics that I do.
Well, you're so right. Like post industrial revolution, when there was like a ton of wealth inequality, which there is again today too, but you know, back in that time period when things getting manufactured just became a thing, right? There was a significant difference between the haves and the have-nots being able to pay a premium to get something of real quality, whether it was clothes or, you know, watches or whatever. There was real craftsmanship behind those products. And that's what made them a luxury good that the haves could get and the have-nots couldn't, you know, didn't have access to. And there was, you know, an actual difference between the quality. But at this point, like, you know, it's like the music thing we were talking about at the beginning. Like, you know, you can print a pretty high quality t-shirt, you know, just like Gucci can, or just like Louis Vuitton can. And so the only thing that these things stand for, these companies stand for now, is status symbols. It's really not, you know, the illusion of saying that there's a higher quality. Like, yeah, there's like a negligible amount of maybe higher quality, and like they're paying maybe 30% more for a little bit better material. But the markup on that, you know, 30% more expensive material is like 3,000%. Like if you really wanted to pay
30% would be crazy, man. Like they're definitely making their stuff for way less than me, just based on, you know.
For sure. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You know, when you're selling a t-shirt for, you know, $40 or whatever, you know, they're selling a t-shirt for 1,000 and they're making it for less. And so the illusion of it being a higher quality is really not true. It's the only thing that it has still, you know, to have a value to it is the status symbol. And what's sad about that is that, you know, for someone who is a multimillionaire, they can afford to go and buy a bunch of Louis Vuitton and like show it as a status symbol. And, you know, I'm fine with that. Like if you want to be into fashion and like kind of get behind all of that stuff, like fine. If you really have the money to do it and it doesn't actually make a dent, then whatever, you know. And there's probably better things that you could do with your money, but I don't have time to care that much about it. You might feel differently. But what I have a problem with is that these companies make most of their money not from the millionaires that buy their clothes, but from the people who want to be like a millionaire and feel like a millionaire. So they're going to spend 40% of their paycheck to buy one thing from Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And like, that's why a lot of these companies, like their fragrance lines, the makeup, etc., like are all like $40, you know, like that's how they get them in, you know.
Right.
That's probably where they're making most of their money.
Yeah.
If I had to guess. But yeah, I think it's also, you know, again, like I'm on my anti-capitalist capitalist shit, you know, but I just wish that people celebrated more operating at a small level and being totally content at like not becoming bigger than that, you know. Like,
yeah,
a friend of mine has a store and he sells vintage goods that he finds, you know, from wherever he finds it, you know. And he was like, you know, man, like if I could have 50 customers and that's it, that would be my ideal dream setup. And when he said that to me at first, I'm like, customers, like what? Like that's not very many, dude, you know? And then I sort of thought about it later, you know, if each of those customers is dropping like whatever, $2,000 a year, You know, I don't know, man. Like there, you can so easily like sustain and like live off of such a small community that will ultimately, I think, like give you more happiness, and I think it will be better for the world too. You know, if everybody's trying to be the next Amazon, the world is going to be finished really soon. You know, and it's
Yeah.
pretty much on that path. And I think that maybe there will be a change in the water soon about just celebrating like people operating at a small level and not wishing to become huge like conglomerates, you know?
Totally. Totally. Well, and I think it's a really cool point because, I personally like love the idea of, a world where you kind of input X amount of energy and get X amount of reward out. And that's, in theory what capitalism should be about. But the problem is that what happens is that capitalism becomes, really unfair and, biases towards, like, these groups that have been, traditionally in power, like, white people and men and all these different things. And, I think that we're starting to talk more about that in our world, but it's still a reality that, there's huge just inequalities in the system overall. But, it's not a situation where it's like, you can't work and, create your own thing and like want to live off of it. What you're saying is like, we should just have a more honest conversation about like, what is success, like that excessive amount of success that we like idealize in our head doesn't lead to happiness or, any fulfillment really. It's just this like, Jeff Bezos is like a megalomaniac. Like he's just, he thinks that he's God, and he's probably just on this really weird mission psychologically to be the most important person because he probably has some sort of issue in his head.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like that's like just like what you said. If we could culturally redefine what it means to be successful, then
Yeah. But I'd like
I,
to see everybody win. I'd like to see everybody be able to kind of like go on vacation and, drink some nice wine and like have money and not worry about it. I don't want to live in a world where like we have to, kind of, you know, rely on the government to, provide, opportunity and jobs and things like that. On the flip side of it, like, socialism doesn't really work as a theory that goes into practice either. So we have to have these conversations and just be more realistic about like, it's not about chasing the Jeff Bezos $100 billion of success. It's about like, how can you create the most success you can in your community, like you're talking about, and make an impact in your community. And, everybody eats at the table together.
yeah. Yeah, and like designer clothes are pretty low on the rung of like the infinite like pool of desire. You know what I mean? Like designer clothes, like people can get that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're saying. Like people that shouldn't be able to buy that are the ones who are really getting fucked by buying it, And it just keeps going, dude. Like after that, like it's the car, and then it's the house, and then it's the extra shit.
Yeah. So how do
And
you stay
so,
grounded with all that? Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that like I think like designer clothes are like sort of like the most evil in that sort of way. Like they're the ones that are like they're the low hanging fruit that like makes you want to keep climbing that tree. And it's a slippery slope that you're never gonna reach the top of, just like you're saying about Jeff Bezos and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you detach from that race, like you kind of have said that you have in your life. You get that clarity, but you also just, you seem to come into more happiness and success in your life, and not just in the sense of financially, but probably financially too, but just in general, if you kind of detach from that world that we're all ingrained, to be in.
Yeah, it's definitely, I am extremely thankful for the privilege that I have to be able to have this position in the first place, you know, but even people that are much more, you know, well off than me, you know, they're, oh, like, what have you been up to lately? Like, oh man, I've just been working nonstop, dude. Like, I'm just grinding, dude, grinding, trying to get to the top. Like, what have you been doing? I'm like, you know, like, went for a nice hike with my dog. Like, I went surfing. You know, went, I made myself a nice dinner, you know, like something like, you know, like, and I did a little work, like, you know what I mean? And yeah, just the detachment of the rat race is important, man. I think if you just are all in on the rat race forever, like you're gonna become really unhappy, you know. And
Does
so,
any part of you like aspire to be the biggest designer, or have like the dopest art that is collected at like the top level? Like your piece, one piece that you do sells for $100 million. Like, does any part of you think that that's cool? And is it a balance in your head?
um, I don't know, man. I just sort of think, who am I to get that spot? Like, look at me, dude. I shouldn't be getting that, you know?
Yeah.
But
But you gotta be careful, because I feel like that attitude a lot of times ends up being the shit that people want the most, you know, because you're just so, what you're talking about is authenticity. And I'm just, you know, I'm just being funny. But when you think about like these things that people want, like it's that attitude, you know? And I think that's why people love your stuff so much, man, because you really are authentic to what you do. And that's what's so dope about all the stuff that you put out, and just the way that you live your life and have your brand, you know? So I'm curious how you would manage that if your shit became that level.
right. I mean, you've sort of caught me at an interesting, I feel like, point in my, you know, path in making clothes and stuff, because it has sort of started to change where I've definitely caught myself like making a design like, oh, this one's gonna sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like, of course, like when I drop that one, like nobody likes it, nobody buys it, you know? And
Right. Right.
always sort of like that. I'm just like, dude, you know what, man? Like for right now, like, and this was something that I used to work for an artist taught me, like to a certain extent, like just follow the bliss, you know, like if you don't feel like doing that today, don't do it today. You know, if you don't think you're going to come up with a design, if you can just detach yourself from that and like do something else, it's almost like your brain is like telling you what it needs, you know, like someone told, like, you know, if you're not in the mood for eggs, like your body's saying like you don't need whatever nutrients are in there. You know what I'm saying? And so I think like if I just listen to my body and listen to my like what it is asking for, that I'll have success then. And I've gotten, you know, disparaged so many times throughout my creative life of sitting down and trying aggressively to come up with it. I'm like, today's the day. I haven't come up with a design in 2 fucking weeks. I need to sit down today and come up with some shit. And then at the end of that day, I'm gonna have the shittiest day. You know what I'm saying? And then one day a week later, I'll just sit down and boom, there it is, you know? And then, you know, ever since I made my first design and I was like, well, that was the only design that I'm ever going to be able to make again that's even remotely dope, you know? I'm never going to be able to make another dope design. That was the last one that I got in the tank, you know?
Yeah.
And just repeatedly putting myself through that shitty, demoralizing process, and then, you know, some random light, I see some stupid fucking billboard and then boom, I make something, has just taught me that I just got to trust the process and follow the bliss to a certain extent, and you know, good things will come, you know. And just thinking about, you know, all of like the stimulus that you take in is all these ingredients, and your brain is just cooking, you know, and you can't control when that thing will be ready, but you'll know when it is, you know. And so long as you're moving, it doesn't need to be forward. just moving at all, like so long as you're doing something, I think good things will happen, you know, even if you're not sure what exactly you're doing in that moment. If you know like where you want to get to, I think, I mean, I'd like to tell myself that you're going to get there eventually, you know. um when I first started making t-shirts, you know, I was thinking, you know, maybe I could do this, you know, for my job or whatever, you know, my form of, you know, supporting myself. I don't know how I'm gonna fucking do that, but I'm just gonna start with one, you know. I'm gonna try to sell one t-shirt and just see what happens. And yeah, just rinse and repeat, man. And don't, I just try to not let myself get too discouraged in those inevitable moments that are gonna really fuck you up. And this is what I'm going through in surfing, dude, every day, getting fucked up over and over again, and then hoping that one day I'll become a little bit better.
Yeah. And kind of not being so attached to the moments that are fucked up to say this is a bad thing, but saying this is a part of my journey, whether it's moving me side to side or it's moving me forwards, or even if it's moving me a little bit backwards, there's always value there in that movement.
Yeah,
And yeah, not being
exactly.
so.
Yeah, so long as I'm moving, something good is happening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to keep going into the surfing analogies because I'm feeling crazy and I'm
No,
really
it's
surfing,
you know,
but
I think it's a very poetic way to approach this episode, and you know, I just am so honored that I feel like, you know, I happen to have caught you in this moment in your life where I think you're reflecting on a lot of things and you're in a cool position in your business and in your art and what you're doing, where you're having these thoughts, and to be able to talk about it in this forum is so dope and inspiring for me as a creative, and I'm sure for anyone else who's listening who's doing anything creative or anything in life, because I think these are real applicable lessons and just, you know, things that can be, you know, that can just help us feel a little better on a day to day, because we all, and I'm sure you do too, have moments where we just get kind of clouded by these things that we think about that we hold a lot of value to, but they don't really mean what we think they mean. And you know, there's more important things in our life, and you know, it sounds like you're thinking through that and thinking through how that affects how you're going to operate in your creative world and in your business. And it's, you know, it's really inspiring to hear, and it just leads to a lot more reflection and thought and then action from there. And so these are the type of conversations that I want to be having, man. And I appreciate you being open in that way, because you know, there's just so much to think about there.
yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me. It's been an honor. I mean, you know, I don't know what's going to happen next, really. I mean, I'm still loving making t-shirts, you know. Do I think that's what I'm going to be doing in 30 years? No. You know what I mean? Like, but that's sort of just the thing, like about following the bliss. Like, I'm enjoying this for now. Like, I sort of can see these hazy visions of something that I want to be, you know, working towards. I'm not exactly sure how to get there, but, you know, I'd like to think I'm zigzagging my way towards it, you know, and not getting too wrapped up in the day to day. You know, when you think about, you know, my learning from an art historical perspective, you know, you can learn about some dude who fucking lived in a closet for like 4 years, you know, and like was like painting like some really weird shit that nobody ever knew about or nobody ever gave a shit about, and then he, you know, became like some world famous whatever, you know. And you know, with the whole immediacy that we've been, you know, overtaken by with Instagram and TikTok and all these things, I think it's easy to lose sight of the process, and that growth takes time and it can take years, you know. And that's okay. And so that's what I'm trying to, you know, stay aware of when I don't make the progress that I want to on like one day, you know.
Yeah.
You can't put it in the microwave.
Right. It's cool to see you thinking through these things in real time. You know, I mean, you said it better than I ever could. I mean, I think so many times people get it twisted and say, you just got to move forward. You just got to move forward. And, you know, it's really not as simple as that. You have to be just kind of forgiving to yourself and just be in motion, period, to your point. And so now that was a big takeaway for me from this conversation. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the authenticity. I appreciate being able to have these conversations. I'm excited to bring you on in person and do it again.
Coming soon, dude. April 15th. Hopefully I'll be able to get an appointment.
Exactly. Everyone's getting their shots up. And we're going to get our hot takes, man. This was a great convo. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, man. It's been an honor and a pleasure. This is my second podcast. Hopefully I didn't blow it too bad.
You killed it, dude. And I listened to your other one that you did for prep for this one, and I loved that one really? Too. So shout out to the guys. Bro-opinionated.
My guys, dude, that's I've never known someone as long as him, man. Since
yeah, he was saying you guys knew each other since you were like 3 years old or some shit. It's crazy. Good stuff. It's like me and Multiple Pete's, bro.
Oh, shit, but boy.
I met Multiple Pete's in the sandbox first day of kindergarten.
I met Multiple Pete's when I fucked up all his hoodies.
Oh man, shout out to my guy Mega Yacht. Follow him on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle, dude?
Mega_yacht.
Mega_yacht. Do you have Twitter? Mega Yacht. Wherever it is, he doesn't care. He's on his own journey.
You can get Mega Yacht, and that's all good.
You know what? Catch him at the beach. Catch a couple waves. Watch him do his thing.
Come watch me try to hang 10 and eat shit.
Exactly. This is the Cam Meekins Show. Thanks so much for listening. If you made it this far in the podcast, I appreciate you. Tell a friend. And that's what we do. We out of here. Peace.